listening to a Frozen Truth production.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Tuesdays with Morris. I am Justin Payne, sitting with the awesome Morris Nelms, and we're so grateful to have you. We want to give a special shout-out opportunity, because I didn't do it last time, so I wanted to make sure I get it today. We wanted to shout out to, was it Razor Standards?
Razor Standards is the name of his shop, yes.
Yeah, so he takes care of Morris's beard, and I don't know about you, but I have always been in awe of Morris's beard for many, many, many years. So then, when you can find someone that can keep him absolutely crisp on the on the beard, I gotta give credit to where credit is due. So shout out to Razor Standards in San Marcos. If you're over there, check out the Williams family, and that what they're doing there is awesome work. It's awesome work. I get to sit by it.
Williams is the guy who trims my beard.
Will Williams, and shout out to also the whole Williams family. Hannah Williams, hey, how you doing? Known her since she was 4 years old. She was the reason that actually inspired me to want to even have a daughter. So I don't mind proclaiming that to the world, because she's such an intelligent, well-spoken young lady, and we love the Williams family. And so always find someone to celebrate. Find someone to celebrate every week, every day. If not, then what's life living if you don't celebrate somebody?
That's very good, sir. That's very good, because we live in a time period where it's very easy to fall into the trap of pessimism. Now, I suppose you could argue that it's been always easy at any given time in history to fall into the trap of pessimism. Is pessimism a trap, or is it realism? That's the million-dollar question, right? But that's also the glass is half empty or half full question. But the idea of finding someone to celebrate takes your vision away from, oh, look at how the world is going to hell in a handbasket, to look at this small glimmer of light here in my immediate circumstances. Or even if it's someone who you don't know but you think is worthy of celebrating, that could be that as well. But I think if it's someone you know personally, if it's someone who's part of your immediate circle, it definitely pulls you away from gloom, doom, and despair and agony and all that, which sells newspapers, and which sells the media. What is the old saying? If it bleeds, it leads. So it's very easy to get caught up in all of that, but much more beneficial to do what you just said. I think
I had to
find
do
something local, immediate, known to you to celebrate. That's beautiful. Thank you.
I literally had to do it because I went to the gym the other day, and it was like the first time I actually went on March. I somehow skipped pretty much all of March. My schedule just fluctuated on so many different ways. Of my routine was off. And so here I am feeling personally embarrassed about myself. I had goals, I had ideas, and what I wanted to do to maintain my physical aspirations this year. And I missed a lot of my March workouts. So I'm going back, getting in the gym. But then, something about when you go to the gym a certain amount of time, you kind of see like your crowd. Like, these are the people that come at 7:30 or so. So you kind of get a bead on who to expect or see. Well, this one gentleman, I saw him and I mentioned him I saw him in the sauna. I said, "Sir, I just want to congratulate you, because you've definitely lost like 40, 50 pounds easy." He said, actually 75. And I was in that moment, because on this one side, I'm like, here I am, just sort of, giving myself a little chastisement of like, you should have done better and you should have been in the gym. But then I'm like, well, let me just shift the focus. And you know what, sir? You've been there. Let me celebrate you and say congratulations to you and give you your flowers, because I know I haven't been doing it, but you've been coming when I haven't. You've been doing what you need to do when I haven't. And that actually just changed the entire outlook. We had a good conversation. In fact, this part where you stayed in the sauna too long, we're like, man, we need to get out of here before we turn into prunes. And because we were like dehydrating ourselves, having a good conversation, because it just led to genuine genuine human interaction, because it's hard to there's a book I read that says if you want friends, show yourself friendly.
Oh, sure.
And it's hard to necessarily interact with the world if you are always so focused on your mistakes and your mishaps and your what you're not doing, and then you just pay attention to what someone is doing and just make positive mention of that, and that can just change your entire day.
Well, there's ample evidence to indicate that if you're in a funk, doing something to help someone else will get you out of that funk.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So, yeah. I don't know where I read it the first time, but I've seen it now in various other sources over and over and over again that, you know, if you're in that place where you want to just curl up and hide, you know, go volunteer at the hospital or something. Do something to where you have to get out and see that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Having been a teacher, your life is that. So I think some people are mystified how teachers can enjoy what they do, because it can be extremely challenging. Students who present all kinds of maladaptive approaches to problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, and they spin around in circles and spend more energy trying to avoid the problem than they needed to actually solve the problem.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, you've been a teacher too. You've seen that over and over and over. You know.
Yeah.
But your ultimate goal is to try to help them. And I always found it energizing, just amazingly energizing whenever I could tell a student realized I was genuinely trying to help him or her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember those moments, you know, where a student said, "Oh, you're really trying to help us." I'm like, yeah.
I mean, people ask like, why would you teach? I said, because the content is just the means. Like, I learned the content. It's not about the content or whatever I'm supposed to teach. Essentially, it's about whatever I'm entrusted to use to change a person's life. That's how I approached education, is the fact that, yeah, you're to know these things, but I want to make sure these things are impactful. This experience is meaningful. And even such, if nothing else takes, that you have a different approach on how you want to experience life after we have interacted, hopefully positively.
Well, it's kind of, I hate to say addicting, but maybe it is. I don't know. Just when you see that light go on in somebody's eyes, if you're teaching them something,
it's absolutely addicting.
And you see that light go on, it's like, you say, "Oh man, that was great. How can I do that again tomorrow?" Or how can I, so okay, good.
They literally, like in secondary fields, they literally will have faculty meetings where they will start off with, "What's your why?" Because they want people to remember the moment it worked, in the middle of all the times that it may not work, when you have Tommy, Jimmy, and Sally that don't want to seemingly approach this space of change with any kind of positive outlook. You got to sometimes just reminisce. Okay, remember Johnny, though, was just like them. I had a student that was just like you. And you may not tell them. Sometimes you just got to tell yourself. It's like, I've been through this. I've experienced this. And so even if they do or don't make it out okay, I can at least not beat myself up on about, it's happened before. It has the potential to alleviate itself in due time.
One of the best things I heard about teaching college students, and I'm sure this would apply to people who teach high school and junior high, is that you have to remember you're teaching tall children.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. And then I think about my own years as an undergraduate, and yeah, I was definitely a tall child. So, it's
I read a quote. Go ahead.
I would prefer that people extend grace to me for my mistakes, So I need to learn to do that for myself and for others to get the most out of the experience. The hardest one to deal with for me was the ones that just things are supposed to be this way, and if you aren't this way, then I can't function. I don't understand what's going on. I remember more than one occasion. The most heartbreaking one was when people would come into my office and tell me they're not creative. We talked about this a long time ago.
Right.
Well, I think our first podcast. But, people would come in and say, you're not creative. I'm not creative. It's like, no, you're not thinking of what that word means. And there's more than one definition of that in the dictionary. So you need to look at the various definitions before you say you're not creative. Right. And you were about to say something.
Well, I mean, I can table that for another day, is that teaching math. I taught math, geometry specifically, and people will walk in and say, well, I can't math. I don't do math. Me and math don't get along. And my response, albeit slightly arrogantly, would be to also say, yeah, but you never had me as a teacher. I meant that not to say that I knew everything or anything about math. It's to say I'm almost like I know exactly how you feel. And because of that, I am not approaching this the same way that you've experienced. And there's a whole nother experience of mathematics and thinking and activating logical and or abstract thought so that you can process it. And half the time I had to break it down to them. You don't go to school to learn. You go to school to learn how you learn.
Yeah, that's true.
If
critical thinking.
The final moment, when you can finally activate, wait a minute, I'm not exactly an auditory learner. I'm a visual learner. I'm a tactile learner. I need to have this, that, and the third in order to process some information. When you can finally make that individual assessment on yourself and activate it, you can technically learn any content because now you can do 95% of the setup in order to intake new information.
I don't know when they came up with those stratagems about explaining how we learn, but I don't remember hearing them until I was well into adulthood. I don't remember anything about what kind of learner are you when I went to the University of Oklahoma or to Cameron University right out of high school. We also didn't have anything that approached what you could call university seminar. So when people say, well, what's this class for? I'm like going, I didn't get anything like this. So I mean, here's the thing. So that made me a very enthusiastic teacher of university seminar because I could see, okay, maybe we can make this transition more interesting to you. I have these things that I have to teach as a part of the global assignment of being in the university seminar department. But the stuff I was more interested in was, you finding out who you are and what you want to get out of this. Because as I would explain to students, I would say, look, the university is a big, gigantic depository of the knowledge of the human race. Just about everything, depending upon the size of the university, just about everything is available in the library. There's stuff about everything under the sun. The bigger the library, the more everything they have. And your professors often have expertise in more than one area and can answer questions from more than one area. But it's up to the student to know what they want to get the most out of the experience.
Right.
Right. And so, that's the best progress I ever made with any student, private or otherwise, is a friend of mine, Mark Devine. He's a fantastic jazz pianist in New York. Now, you remember Mark Devine?
Yeah, I remember. He was an awesome guy.
Anyway, when he came to me, I was teaching not at Cameron University, not at University of Oklahoma, but I was teaching at a place called Takeo Westmar University, which was in Lamars, Iowa, as part of the Clark Terry Institute of Jazz, International Institute of Jazz Studies. And he came from New Hampshire. And he came in very specific. He said he wanted to know how to play like Red Garland. He wanted to know how to play like Wynton Kelly. He was interested in those guys. I was very interested in those guys. But directing him to what things to practice and how to work on that was very easy compared to the person who says, well, I'm not sure what I want to do. I don't want to copy anybody.
Right.
You know, when they say I don't want to copy anybody, it's just kind of like, okay, there's a fundamental part of this thinking that you don't understand at all. Everybody copies somebody.
Right.
Even the person who doesn't think they've copied anybody, let's say they're in a cover band and they've learned 15 different number one hits. Well, then you copied a whole bunch of musicians, and somewhere between assembling all that stuff together,
it still is.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's a famous story. I may have used this one already. I don't know. Edit it out if I have. Where Hank Williams Sr., the guy who wrote Cold, Cold Heart and all kinds of other country and western classics, was talking to, I believe, Ernest Tubb, who preceded him in being a hit maker at the Grand Ole Opry. And he said, when Roy Acuff was on the Grand Ole Opry, I learned every one of his songs and I could imitate him perfectly. He says, then you came along and I learned all your songs and I got to where I could imitate you perfectly. And between the two of you, I got myself a style. Which is,
and that's
how it works.
But here's the fun thing. I have two little interesting tidbits that hit me. One is a pop culture reference from the movie Runaway Bride. And Julia Roberts' character is the bride that always leaves everybody out the altar. And then eventually she finds someone that confronts her with that issue. And he said, you don't even know how you like your eggs. And so she eventually just got the gumption enough to just try every egg style.
That's funny.
To finally, because she always just adapted to everybody but didn't know herself. So therefore she could never commit to anything because she didn't even have her own foundation of what she liked. And that was interesting, a thought that I had, and I'm not sure if it's concluded, but...
What style did she end up liking?
Benedict. She liked her eggs Benedict. And I'm a fan as well. Especially if I go to Snooze. Oh, man, they're not paying me for this, but they're Benedicts at Snooze. Oof.
Where's Snooze?
Snooze, there's one in Kyle. There's a couple in Austin and San Antonio. But it's a little brunch spot.
Okay.
6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Yeah. Kyle 1626, Parkway. So you can pay me for that one. But their Benedicts are incredible. Okay. And the other thing that hit me when it came to that influence was sometimes people are so good at it that it's hard for them to break out of it. For example, Eddie Murphy, a comedian that is beyond the first half of his career was almost completely tied to impressions. Of how well he did James Brown, how well he did Mr. T, how well he could emulate Michael Jackson, even like off of his Delirious stand-up or his
Elvis Presley.
The way I still hold Eddie Murphy's Elvis Presley as the top tier Elvis Presley. If I close my eyes, I still listen. I'm like, that is beyond incredible. But he had a flop when he tried to make his own single. Now, granted, it was produced by Rick James.
Party all the time. It was cute. You're saying the song didn't take off.
It didn't take. But he was famous for everybody else's impression. He can do Stevie Wonder. He could do and just have millions of views on Saturday Night Live. But when he did his own thing, people were like, I don't like Eddie's voice. I like Eddie doing somebody else's voice.
That's too funny. Because there's a parallel, Sammy Davis Jr.
Right.
Who got famous because he could do impersonations. He was kind of a groundbreaker because he was a black guy who did impersonations of Caucasians.
And he could do it to their face and sound just like them.
Yeah. And I would even argue that his regular voice is, to some degree, an impersonation of Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he sings a lot like Frank. Now, eventually you can tell, oh, no, that's not, no, there it is. And as he moved into different repertoire, he became more and more Sammy Davis Jr.
And that was Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx, very similarly, can impersonate everybody. And then he came into this major breakthrough with doing Ray. And so embodied Ray, probably the number one embodiment of Ray.
Well,
Ray
Charles. You remember James Polk.
Yes.
James Polk was Ray Charles's arranger.
Dr. Polk.
And he taught both of us at various points because I went to Texas State as a graduate student. He went as an undergraduate. We both encountered Dr. Polk in various places. Dr. Polk was Ray Charles's arranger for at least 10 years. And I asked him about the movie, and he said Jamie Foxx fooled him. This is somebody who was around Ray Charles for 10 years, and Jamie Foxx was so convincing that he found himself doing a double take. Mm-hmm. That tells you how good it was.
Yes.
Yeah, and well-deserved Academy Award.
Yes. And I'm so glad that, but up until then, his R&B career still wasn't, it was there, but it wasn't, it didn't power through the charts yet until around the time that Ray came out. And so he also had that collaboration with Kanye West with Still Doing Ray, and then he did an album right after that, and it was fully just Jamie Foxx's own sound that felt much more comfortable, Jamie being Jamie, instead of trying to impersonate anybody else. That is sometimes, like, when it comes to your influences and who you are and what has built you into you, it's hard for some people to separate their sources versus their I don't know. It's almost like, it's probably where you're talking about, like, where do you take off instead of just recreating your sources? You know,
some people never do.
Right.
It took John Faddis, fantastic jazz trumpet player, it took John Faddis a long time to break away from Dizzy Gillespie. He had imitated Dizzy Gillespie so well that, you know, once again, you had to listen very carefully to realize it wasn't Dizzy Gillespie. Eventually, you know, he found ways to break out of it. Sonny Stitt was thought to be kind of a Charlie Parker clone for much of his career. Well, I mean, what he did was ingenious. He started playing tenor saxophone and played in another style. You know, so he basically, when you went to hear Sonny Stitt, if he played alto, he played one style. If he played tenor sax, he played another style. It was still nonetheless Sonny Stitt. You could still hear the same musician. I have agonized about that. What put me to rest was not my own realization, but talking to my wife about that question. She goes, I always know when I hear a recording that it's you on piano. And I'm like, what? Okay. Something is coming across that I'm not aware of.
That is
and
good.
My brother also could recognize me on piano most of the time.
That is good, because perhaps now we get very transcendental in this place, because if
goody.
Because it is at that moment that you don't realize the compilation. Like, you know your ingredients. Let's just say like that. I love to cook. You know your ingredients. You know you use this particular list or voicing, lick or voicing or something like that. Well, I know where it came from. But I think about cooking. I have salt, pepper, oregano, blah, 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 blah. But once I cook, my wife loves my dish. And even though there might be the same recipe, same ingredients, there's something about the way I put it together that is unique to the presentation of that dish. And that could still, and maybe that is always the point of musicianship and or creativity. It's not so much always the fact that you have ingredients, it's just what you do with that still is uniquely you.
Absolutely. And okay, some of that also comes from realizing your limitations. Thinking about pop culture references, I'm thinking about Clint Eastwood says a man has to know his limitations. One of the Dirty Harry films, he says that.
Let's say Clint Eastwood's limitations are normally just anger or confusion.
And he's a brilliant guy in that he took a very limited range of acting abilities and turned it into a spectacular career.
Yeah.
I mean, he's won Best Picture for Unforgiven, you know, and he played that same guy, just like you said, anger and confusion. Yeah. I hadn't tagged it that way, but you're right. Interesting.
And that's why, for example, I love Robin Williams, because he will pull. He was so versatile that I almost would have different categories of Robin Williams.
Robin Williams did Shakespeare.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, he did Shakespeare.
But he could do Shakespeare as a whoever, you know, like.
Well, yeah, he's a chameleon. I mean, he's Michael Caine. We talked about him a little bit. He's another chameleon. You put him in a certain role, you may not even recognize him, right? Yeah. So
You asked a question. Which one of my Val Kilmer? What's
Val Kilmer? What was your favorite Val Kilmer role? Yes.
What would be my favorite Val Kilmer role?
And it'd be hard for me to pick one because he had so many good ones.
The one that sticks out to me the most is actually Real Genius.
See, and I haven't seen that one yet, so I need to see that one. Obviously,
it is him almost going Robin Williams, meeting. He is the precursor in that movie. He is the precursor to the entire career of whoever plays. Suddenly, I forget his name. Deadpool.
That guy. Yeah. What is his name? Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. So the Val Kilmer of Real Genius is Ryan Reynolds in this generation, and that sarcastic, witty, intelligent, but in that character, you still see him struggle of being a child genius who is forced to basically do forced labor at a university, and then have to give up that role to a new child genius. And how does he work that out? And it's comical. It's perfect little 80s, mid 80s.
I'll look for it. I've seen it come up because I've looked at, since he died, I've looked at like lists of his movies.
Real Genius is a big one for me.
It's hard, like I said, it's hard for me to pick one. I always love it when I discover somebody who becomes big before they become big. That happened to me with Seals and Crofts. They used to come on TV. Those are the folks who had a big hit on Summer Breeze, which was also covered by the Isley Brothers. They came on a TV show for kids on Saturday morning, and it was just the two of them. One of them played mandolin, and the other one played guitar, I think. And they sang. I thought, wow, these guys are good. And then all of a sudden they became big. And so I was kind of proud of myself.
It's like, I knew they were good then.
Val Kilmer, early in his career, played Billy the Kid in a made-for-TV movie on Turner Network Television called Gore Vidal's Billy the Kid. And Gore Vidal had written this teleplay about Billy the Kid.
That's one of his first roles.
Yes. And Paul Newman played the role in a movie called The Left-Handed Gun, which was made in the late 50s. Gore Vidal was not happy with that movie because they pretty much butchered his script, right? They rewrote the script and did what they wanted to do. And I have seen The Left-Handed Gun and thought Paul Newman did a very good job given the role, playing the role the way he interpreted it. I didn't buy his interpretation because he played Billy the Kid as somewhat somebody whose brain wasn't all there. It's kind of like he would kind of stop and you'd have moments where you realize, oh, wow, okay. Somebody hit him in the head too hard or something. It was that kind of an effect. Later, Val Kilmer plays the role, and he brings his energy to it. And I remember watching him going, this is a young Brando. This guy's fantastic. And that was well before any of the other movies. And I finally found a copy of it on DVD and ordered it, so I'm going to watch it again and see if it was as good as I remember. I'm sure he is. It wasn't a great movie. It was one of those that was more committed to being historically accurate than it was to being entertaining. So, it was fascinating to me in that sense.
So they tried to make a film, not a movie. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It was made for television, and Turner Network Television was doing a lot of historical stuff at that time anyway.
Okay.
So that's one I would pick. If I was going to pick one of his more well-known ones, go ahead.
I just squeaked one in last year. It was the first year I finally watched Tombstone.
He's magnificent.
And I was just upset. Like, of all these references I've heard in pop culture, never really saw the movie, but then I didn't realize how star-studded the movie was. And he just completely stood out.
Yeah.
Among them all. And these are...
He and Johnny Ringo, the guy that played Johnny Ringo, whose name won't come to me now, Martin Beams, B-I-E-M-S, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But the two of them almost walk off with the show.
Right.
It's like you're more interested in what's going on with them than with anybody else.
Right, than the actual main characters.
And the thing that really got me about Kilmer in that role is he's playing this guy who's got tuberculosis. So you get this feeling that he's going to die any minute.
Right.
Because they have no cure for it or treatment in it. for that. So he's just, walking around drinking and gambling and, taunting people and hoping somebody, kills him. So he'll be put out of his misery.
And it's just in a cold sweat the whole movie.
Yeah, he's sweating the whole time, and he looks sick.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he looks like, don't mess with this man.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a marvelous performance and a pretty marvelous movie. Now, there's one I'm going to mention. It is not a good movie, but it's worth it to see Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer together. They don't have a scene together, but they're both in this movie. It's called The Island of Dr. Moreau, and it got trashed by the critics. And yeah, it's a problematic movie. They had all kinds of issues with this movie. Constant rewrites. John Frankenheimer didn't understand how to work with certain kinds of actors, especially Brando and Val Kilmer.
Those are two islands of people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've got Marlon Brando. See, I've seen the other version with Charles Lawton, which was made in the 30s, The Island of Dr. Moreau. And Charles Lawton was fantastic. And what I realized when I was watching is that, wow, Marlon Brando is doing a parody of Charles Lawton. And that he did that kind of thing a lot. Brando has so many great performances. The one I would recommend to anybody who's never really checked him out is The Freshman, where he parodies Don Corleone. Watch a little bit of Don Corleone in The Godfather, then watch him in The Freshman, and he's parodying himself.
Wow.
And it's just... Rod Steiger said he couldn't believe he could do it. He said he just was amazed at what Brando did in that movie. In this movie... he's almost phoning it in. I'll give, but Brando phoning it in, it's still Marlon Brando.
Right.
It's still that voice. It's still that presence and everything. And his character dies early in the film. And then Val Kilmer gets to play this guy who's just going nuts. He's completely all at sea, and he just kind of... Now, they're both hamming it up. Val Kilmer, as he goes crazier and crazier and crazier, starts impersonating Brando. So he's parodying Brando, who's parodying Charles Lawton. And it's just, it's a very nuanced, rich performance from both of them. Does it make it a great movie? No.
But it's the fact that Val Kilmer has the comedic gall in a way to attempt that.
He even told Brando he was going to do it.
Right.
And Brando's like, I don't care. They paid me my money. I'm gone. You do whatever you want.
And so even with that, I do appreciate, like I say, Val Kilmer had a great career. Of course, it was, as some would say, almost cut short, unfortunately, due to his illness. But I always appreciate the sentiment to allow him a swan song in Top Gun Maverick.
That was great.
It not only was incredible for the sake of Val Kilmer, but it really helped, bridge the gap between the first and second movie, because we're dealing with almost 30 years passing or so, 40 dang near, since the original Top Gun. And so how do you allow like Maverick in the movie to age without aging out, so to speak, and then you still have him connected to Iceman, who is I believe he was like an admiral or something, and that was major.
He walked off with it. Every scene he was in was the scene that's the stuff I remember about the movie more than anything else, is what Val Kilmer was in, and he couldn't really talk anymore.
No.
Yeah, he could talk a little bit. The one I want to see come to DVD is his one-man show where he plays Mark Twain.
He did do that. That's right.
And that was his personal favorite of all the movies he's got out there. So those powers that be, whoever's got the footage of him doing Mark Twain, because I know it was recorded, let us have a copy of that. I want to see him do that. He wrote it himself. He produced it himself. He directed it himself. It was his baby. He was proudest of it, of all the things that he'd ever done. And,
we'll see.
I hope somebody makes it available. So, yeah. Rest in peace, Val Kilmer.
My last honorable mention would be Prince of Egypt.
He did the voice of Moses, yeah, and the voice of God,
and the voice of God. And
it was fantastic.
And
I didn't even know it was Val Kilmer.
Exactly. And then I appreciated the perspective, and this can lead to another conversation, how it was the voice of Moses and the voice of God, and how one said it was the director's aim to illuminate how sometimes that inner voice that drives you starts off sounding like you. But I know it's almost like it sounds like you, but then it says do what you don't want to do. It confronts what you would normally be led in your physical instinct to do. And then it starts off in that voice. And so the fact that Val Kilmer was both Moses and the voice of God in that movie was powerful to reflect back on. And that's just an iconic movie.
It's far and away the best treatment of that story I've ever seen. I mean, sorry, Charlton. I like some things I like about the Ten Commandments, but there are a lot of things I don't like about it.
I've spoken to God.
Yeah.
It's my Charlton.
It's just, I get, when I first saw the Ten Commandments, I thought, wow, this is cool because of, special effects.
It was incredible.
They were cutting edge special effects. It was this massive epic, and it told a story. And then I went back and watched it. I was going, why did they think this kind of wooden acting is good? The only people I thought that were really acting were Yul Brynner and Edward G. Robinson. They were the only people to me that were like really, that weren't just cardboard characters. They weren't just cutouts, and they weren't just
Charlton Heston looked like he was always looking at a light in the background somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there was one scene where he goes and kneels next to his mother and says, "I shall always," something or other to his mother, and I just started laughing. It was just so poorly done, and he's another one of those actors that give him the right role. He's better at certain kinds of quiet roles. He played a role called Will Penny, where he plays a cowboy who's in love with this woman who wants him to stay and help her run the farm, and he's just like, I don't know how to do this. I would be cheating. He wants to stay,
and he still does the Charlton Heston look away.
Oh yeah, he does all of those things, but he has he in other roles. When he's not playing something so, I don't know. He does Mark Antony well in a version of Julius Caesar. He's one of those guys. I'm like you said, he's one of those actors like, this is my good side.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's like, and the problem with that is, when an actor does that kind of thing, it means they are acting. They are not being.
Right.
When it doesn't matter if Marlon Brando's phoning it in. When he says, "I'm Dr. Moreau," I believe him. I always believe him. I haven't seen some of the ones where he really infamously phones it in, like Christopher Columbus. I haven't seen that one.
There's an infamous story where somebody wanted to meet Jim Carrey. I wanted to say perhaps it was Nicole Kidman, but I might be mistaken. Please correct me in the comments. But there was a famous actress that wanted to meet Jim Carrey, but he was in the role of playing Andy. Suddenly I forget Andy Kaufman.
Oh, wow. Yes, I've heard about this.
So he was in the middle of being Andy Kaufman, and Jim Carrey goes full method, full Andy the entire time, so where they almost stopped production because he was too Andy. And so this famous actress goes to meet him, but the problem is he had to call him Andy and not call him Jim. And she absolutely hated it.
Yeah, because she didn't meet him.
She didn't want to meet Jim. She didn't want to meet Andy. She met Jim. And another tidbit was that it's rumored. This is rumored, so I am not confirming that this to be true. But it is rumored that Denzel Washington, in many of his latest films, has to have a scene where he's doing his walk. Like he always has a certain very shouldery walk in every one of his films.
It makes perfect sense. Okay. John Wayne, very limited actor. Okay. Yet, reading other much better actors talking about him, they'll tell you things that you didn't realize. Marlon Brando said he always enjoyed watching John Wayne. And Katharine Hepburn said much the same thing, that he had this mincing little walk that he figured out that would keep him on camera longer. So I would not be surprised to find out Denzel was paying attention to that and said, okay, this is going to give me more screen time. I'll dominate the screen longer. I'm going to work on this walk.
It's a slow, determined walk, and I can almost like it's in Training Day, it's in John Q, it's in it's in American Gangster. Oh man, I love that movie, and it's always just sort of like just he's always just taking his time and milking that transition of whatever it is of him arriving on the crime scene or something.
He's it's our best living actor, Denzel, maybe. You know, I'd be hard pressed to come up with anybody that I'd put ahead of him. And at the same time, I'm saying our best because, you know, there are certain roles I wouldn't put him in that I'd put somebody else in.
That's true, but I think the small unfortunate reality was the fact that we've lost so many actors in the past 2 years, so many, and a bevy of actors that have changed the generation of movies. And so I would have to almost really agree with you. Out of those that are still producing movies, Denzel to me is absolutely in there.
What was your reaction to The Book of Eli?
The Book of Eli was the complete, beautiful revelation of the revolution of the political side of religion.
That's good.
It to me told it wonderfully that in the space of anarchy, the power of hope is often the ambition of the enemy.
Yeah, that was an astute response because you responded to my question directly. What was your reaction to The Book of Eli? Not Denzel in The Book of Eli or Gary Oldman in The Book of Eli, but The Book of Eli. And yeah, I don't want to give anybody who's hasn't watched it. It's worth watching just for the big surprise at the end.
It made me want to do better.
Yeah, that too.
That's for sure. Like, you know what? Let me go do my homework.
Now, I thought the movie indulged itself with gratuitous violence. You know, I thought there was some points in there like, no, it did not need that. You know, you didn't need to put that in. The movie could have been, you could have told the same story without some of those excesses. But they were trying to create the feeling of an apocalypse where law simply does not apply. But anyway, just the playoff between Denzel and Gary Oldman was also worth the whole movie.
Yeah. Gary Oldman's a great actor.
He's another one I would put in the top 10 living right now. He can do anything too.
It's the imagine of like if you start just calling out some of the movies he's been in, it's the range that he has demonstrated is.
Yeah.
You almost forget that he did that movie. It's like, oh yeah, he was in that movie and he killed it. Oh yeah, he was in that movie and he killed that role. And half the time there are supporting roles. It's actually with Gary Oldman, you don't see too many starring roles, but he is such a scene stealer. He is a scene stealer. And that's why I said I even referred to Dave Chappelle similarly in his early years. Like, he wasn't in starring roles too much other than this movie Half Baked in his early career. Other than that, he was just stealing scenes from major comedians that he was aside with. Like I said, he was the comedian in Nutty Professor. One of my favorite movies that he's a scene stealer is Blue Street with Martin Lawrence.
Okay.
He only has a couple of scenes that me and my siblings still quote to this day just because of the way Dave Chappelle is just outright just hilarious to us. And Gary Oldman has that same dramatic ability to just be iconic. So out of all the movies I know Gary Oldman to be, I still love him in The Fifth Element.
I was going to mention that movie. He's perfect.
Absolutely.
He's perfect. He's perfect in that film. He's one of the best things about that film. That movie, I enjoy that movie. But what I really enjoy are all the side characters. Chris Tucker's totally over the top performance.
Tucker's, oh my gosh.
And Gary Oldman's villain, yes. And there's some other ones. Some Ian Holm, I think, has a role as some kind of a monk, and it's like, yeah, he's
priest.
perfect. There's one of the guys. He was a black heavy most of the time who plays like I think the guy.
He was Zeus. Suddenly, I forget his name. He was like Debo in Friday, and then so now he's the president.
Yeah, he has this incredible gravitas, and I mean, it's like the I guess you would say ancillary characters, or you know, Bruce Willis is Bruce Willis, and he's fine, and the ingenues is fine, but they're not what kept me interested in The Fifth Element.
The opera singer.
Oh, everybody talks about that. That was just so cool, you know.
If there's any, like, that's the craziest part. You could almost put Fifth Element's opera, the diva scene, into, if you almost have to say, in Western culture's understanding of what, if you were to play an opera, you'd hear Nessun Dorma, you'd hear the duet, which also suddenly the name forgets me, but everyone sings that the beautiful duet. But then also, like, top 3 or 4, the next one would be the diva scene from Fifth Element. Like,
it's beautiful.
It is so absolutely iconic with vocal acrobacy. I just made up that word.
It's impeccable. It really is impeccable. I mean, it's and it's a projection. It's a science fiction projection of what music might evolve into. That's very believable. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, where's music going to go? Nobody really knows, but, you know, combinations and recombinations of the elements that we have are likely to continue. Before we get off Gary Oldman, he was in, I can't remember the name of it, but he plays a British spy in a John le Carré novel. It may have been called The Looking Glass War. I'm not sure what the name of it was.
That might have been it.
But it's totally reserved. He's a man who always plays his cards close to his chest. He's a man who never lets on anything. Even when he's won at the very end, the only thing you see is a very slight smile and a little flicker in his eyes. It's wow. You know, he played that really well. And he's basically having to solve a mystery. So he's basically just going from one room to another, talking to all these people and finding out this stuff, and slowly putting the parts together. And you watch him figuring things out just that much sooner than you do. And, it's a good performance from Gary Oldman. Yes. I loved him as Dracula.
I like Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, he's a good actor. He is very good.
Maybe not on the same level, but I like his consistency of dramatic intensity with also sarcastic flair. I don't know, but when you get and you ask the question of best actors, I would say working, not just alive, but working, because Denzel's technically still working.
Right.
The list is becoming fewer
that we know about.
You know, I mean, and then I transitioned to Mahershala Ali. I love his everything. Time I go back to projects he's been into, I'm like, I have been ingrained in his, like, the way his latest performance for me that just sticks out is The Green Book.
Oh, that's the one about Don Shirley, the piano player?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I haven't seen that one yet. I should have seen it by now.
That performance is beautiful. It is beautiful. Opposite of Vito, I think. And another actor.
Viggo Mortensen's another one, yeah.
And another actor that is just, I don't know, it's like... There's movies that are must-see to me, but then I think the tough part is it's defining must-see, because after Netflix came out, they created a subsection of when I will see this movie. Because if I don't need to go spend $20 and dang near a ticket, depending on where you see it, I'll wait. It's like, do I need to see this in the theater, or will I enjoy it in the comfort of my home eventually on whatever streaming platform?
Does it have to? Is it something I have to see on the big screen?
Right.
Sometimes, yes, but most of the time, the TVs we get now are so nice that it's like, you know.
Like,
Okay,
it was
for
like-
instance, I wanted to see Kalki in the theater. It's this Indian sci-fi movie that came out last year sometime, and it was getting all kinds of rave reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, etc. And it is a big, how would I describe it? Star Wars / Dune done from a Hindu perspective.
Okay.
Right. I enjoyed a lot of things about it. I thought it was quite good. It's the first of a trilogy, so it ends with a kind of a cliffhanger. I'll spoil it that much. It's beautiful to look at, but I waited and watched it on TV at home, and it's like, yeah.
But then if it was Dune, I'm like, I have to see it.
And see, I didn't see the second one in the theater. I saw the first one in the theater because I really wanted to, mainly because I'd heard so much about the soundtrack.
Right.
To me, the soundtrack stole the show.
Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, it was just that
Again,
soundtrack was just
Hans Zimmer. Like, that's where you go to the top 5 ever composers. It's to me, it's split between Hans Zimmer and John Williams.
You're talking about movie composers.
Movie composers.
Yeah. Top 5 ever.
I said movie composers. I hope I said movie composers.
Yeah.
Movie composers. You put Hans Zimmer on a track, you're good. And but I had to see the second one up, Dune, in the theater because I wanted to hear that subwoofer get a workout. Because you're supposed to see more worms. That's like.
So did you feel
time.
okay? I haven't seen the second one. Did you feel the second one lived up to the first one?
Well, the worst part is I'm still trying to separate that from the 1980s version with Patrick Stewart and that whole cast.
That movie was a misfire.
It was a beautiful misfire, but it's ingrained in my in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know what was wrong with it. David Lynch. A lot of people think David Lynch hung the moon, and I've never been that crazy about him as a
it could be really what it should have been done like James Cameron, where he was like, I did Avatar. I wrote Avatar in like '89, but I didn't have the technology to film it until 2012. It is just probably one of those situations. Like, it was too beautifully sci-fi as a book that you had to almost do it right, and you couldn't do it entirely right with the sci-fi approach to cinema at that era.
Yeah.
And so they did the best with honestly what they had, but then it was still underfunded.
Well, that's the other thing that Frank Herbert complained about with Dune, was that it was underfunded, underpromoted. He felt that it could have been a bigger hit if it had been approached a little bit differently.
Like, it was a very great PBS special. That's kind of like...
Now, there was a TV made-for-TV version of Dune.
Yeah.
In between the one from the 1980s and the more recent one that I thought was quite good.
And that was on the Sci-Fi Channel or something like that? Yeah. And
it looked more like the book.
It did. And that's where they're even picking up with Max. They even picked up on a storyline that's based off of the Bene Gesserit before the events of Dune. I think it's called The Prophecy or something like that. But Dune was another movie I had to see in theaters because, like I said, there's this aspect of I need to see. I'm an audio guy. I need to hear the boom. I need to hear the Atmos. I need to feel the immersion of the sound. And if I'm not looking forward to a performance by a specific actor or story, I'll wait. And so that affects my rating already of like how good of a movie really is it. Well, I mean, if I am not dying to see the movie, that already puts it in a class B.
Well, what's interesting is, there was a movie that came out last year called Thelma, right? It came out about the same time as Inside Out 2. Thelma was an independent film, loosely based on a true story, about a 95-year-old woman or a 90-something-year-old woman who got scammed out of $10,000. And she went on the warpath and got her money back.
This is like... Okay.
Oh, it's a great show.
Now that you say when you say Warpath and Thelma, like everybody's clicking now.
Well, I mean,
exactly with that reference.
It's okay. I'm not giving anything away. This was in the trailer. At one point, Richard Roundtree, who played Shaft, it was his last role. He plays her buddy who helps her get her money back, and she's like, well, I'm going to need a gun. And he said, have you ever used a gun before? He says, how hard can it be? Idiots do it all the time. And the woman who was in it, she's 90-something years old, and she's been a character actor all of her career, and she's never had a starring role, and this was her first starring role. And I heard about this movie. I said, okay, I'm going to go to the theater to see this, good, bad, or indifferent, because I want to make a statement with what I spend my money on.
Okay.
And I went in the middle of the afternoon, and there was almost no one there, and everybody there was older than me. It definitely appealed to the demographic it was looking for.
Okay.
But, I think probably the theater was full of people who hadn't been to see a movie in 20 years, you know.
But
there they were watching Thelma.
You talk about that revenge movie, you're like, hold on, you have my attention.
Inside Out 2
it's a
funny show. It
Inside
really
Out
is
2
good.
was a good one, though.
Which one?
Inside Out 2.
Oh, yeah.
More or less because it's almost, you wanted to experience that kind of moment. There's something about theatrical moments that are better experienced corporately, in my opinion. Like,
Pixar has been, in my opinion, the most consistent franchise out there for some time now. I can't think of any Star-Spangled Turkeys from Pixar that I've seen. The critics said Cars 2 wasn't very good. My brother and another source I can think of told me, no, it was fun.
it was its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice.
You know, and they do know how to tell a story. And my personal favorite is Wall-E.
Oh my gosh.
I think Wall-E is incredible.
Wall-E, now you got me. Because Wall-E to me was so good, I forgot that there was no dialogue for 45 minutes.
It did, when it was over, I looked at my wife and said, this is the movie Charlie Chaplin would make if he was alive today.
Yes.
It was pure Chaplin. And I love Charlie Chaplin. If you don't like Charlie Chaplin, you may not enjoy it. But people who don't like Charlie Chaplin, once they start talking, you're going to get the other kind of movie you want, because the second half of the movie is dialogue.
Right. I love that first half. That first half to me was, in my opinion, is the beauty of storytelling, where you use, it's like less is more. Mm-hmm. You have to, and you find yourself literally trying to relate to a robot. And
well, that's the other thing that's amazing is the two main characters are robots who have hearts.
Right.
We find out they have hearts, and then we want to see their hearts grow. Mm-hmm. And we want them to be together, and we want them to be happy. And, you know, yeah, it was like pet peeve. Wall-E comes out. It's lauded across the board by nearly everybody as being one of the most beautiful things out there, except for a certain group of people who didn't like the fact that Eva was the stronger character. She had guns, and she was the action adventure hero, and Wall-E was this passive janitor robot.
let her go, man. Like,
thank you. I was just like, it was like, come on, man. This is a cartoon. This is an animated film about two robots, right? Robots have specific tasks in this world. And you're complaining because the man in this story is more passive than the woman. In other words, when she's out in outer space and saves him, right, she saves him because she has the ability to fly and he doesn't.
That is a very, kind of opinion, in my opinion, because...
Yeah, thank you.
First off, an observation is beautiful opposites that always attract. And it is also within the demeanors of people. Where Wall-E is like, it doesn't matter even with the genders. The fact that if you have one personality that is business, gotta get it done. This is all we have to do. We have a directive. That would be Eve, essentially, or Eva.
And yet we know she has a heart, because the first time she gets a chance to fly on her own, she flies for the joy of flying.
Right, when she realizes her freedom from the directive, and she's still looking for that. And sometimes that's how people are in even like corporate settings. On the corporate job, I need to do this, that, and the third, and I'm the boss. But when I'm in my private life, I need to be free and whatever. And so the balance of that for some people is they need to have someone in their life that while they're in their busyness, mode, that someone else is very, hey, we need to take some time away. Hey, let's hold hands. Hey, let's go on a walk. Hey, let's think about the softer things in life. And essentially that's Wall-E, where I've been alone so long, I've been hoping for someone to hold a hand with. I love that he's always just like, I just want to hold hands. And those personalities are often the beautiful mixes that we need in life to be balanced, regardless of gender. Because there can be a high business woman and a soft and subtle man, and it could be just quite the opposite. High businessman, soft and subtle woman, and they work both ways, just the same.
If these two people, and these are two fictional characters, but if these two people exist in real life and they find an uplifting relationship together and they're able to be a blessing to the people around them,
what difference does it make?
Thank you.
Exactly.
The other thing that I think is absolutely marvelous about Wall-E is it makes you actually care about the fate of a cockroach.
Or the fact that he does not die.
That was just like, I'm just like, you made me care about a cockroach. How'd you do that? That was
the
amazing.
Worst part was, not worst part, but another part was the fact that world was so desolate and disgusting and dingy, and I hope it just helps everybody kind of realize, take care of the world you live in.
One critic that I don't particularly care for, I think Michael Medved is his name, said that it was the brilliant but bleak Wall-E. Okay, fair enough, but it didn't stay bleak.
Right.
It was bleak at the beginning because it was saying, this is possibly what could happen if we don't pay more attention to this small planet we live on. But no, I think that's a.
You also have to be a Hello Dolly fan.
Well, yeah, it would help.
Because you're not going to avoid that. The way that Pixar got away with that, I'm like, good job.
Wall-E is a collector. He basically, if you don't know the premise, Wall-E is a collector. He goes through trash every day and compacts it. But he's always finding things. He finds little things in it that he thinks are interesting, and then he takes them to his little place where he lives. And he has a video of Hello Dolly, and he watches it and he dances along to it. And that's his thing that he does,
But that was a very transformational movie, in my opinion. But also, like, you had to experience it. And that's what I'm saying. Movies are meant to be an experience. They're meant to be an expression, an experience, and then an existential moment, hopefully, if it's well done. And the exposure to that when it comes to actors. And I think the other part is we're not having a large list of more mainstream actors because the studios and the amount of movies and the amount of exposure to all kinds of movies is at an all-time high. There any independent movie theaters and straight to streaming platforms and or just essentially make a movie, put it on YouTube halfway as a distributor. Like there are so many incredible performances that are being broken out all over the world from even TV shows such as Squid Games or Korean or all of these Eastern countries that are just coming out with incredible films that are now finally even getting the Oscar play that they deserve, because it's that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's hard for us to go back to even a simple list, let alone American actors, because I would like to say that the market is flooded with such great talent that are still developing as generational leads. You don't need always another number one actor in order to have a hit movie. That's
interesting because I remember James Burke, who was a history of science guy with BBC in the 1960s. He did two really fantastic series. One was called Connections. The other one's called The Day the Universe Changed. The Day the Universe Changed is a must-see. It's incredible because he talks about how this happened and that led to this, then this led to this, and this led to this, and then all of a sudden, look, here's where we are today. And you're going, oh, wow. That he takes you through it. It's amazing the way he can do that. He said I think Kenneth Clark also said something about this as well. We may be living in an era now where we're not going to see the ridiculously great people at the top like we've seen in the past, right? There's going to be a second tier of people who are all just fantastic, even if they're not quite as spectacular as the people we look at in the past. And and that's okay, because it in their view, it indicated a maturation of the species in a way.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
that's what I'm still working on.
Well,
Because,
I would like to submit we're living in it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're blessed to podcast in an era where the market is beautifully flooded with all kinds of opinions and shows and conversations and topics, and they're all valuable. They're all valuable because that's the point.
And to this question about greatest actors and all that, there's a local actor, Mark Pouet, who lives in Austin. I saw him play Macbeth. I saw him play Scrooge.
And you'd put him up there,
Oh, absolutely. His version of Macbeth had things in it that I've never seen anybody else do. That's the beautiful thing is when an actor comes to the stage or an actress and comes to the stage and they do something, you're going, oh wow, I would never have thought of it that way. Frances McDormand. Oh my goodness, woman from Fargo. Mm-hmm. And she and Denzel just recently did a version of Macbeth.
They did.
And she produced it. It was her baby. She plays Lady Macbeth, and Denzel plays Macbeth. And
I enjoyed that. And that was the black and white Apple TV version.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while others are like, I didn't like it. I'm like, number one, it's still a play for stage. So when you're it's a screenplay.
When the people who told you they didn't like it, they didn't like it because they didn't understand the language?
It was hard to digest why they didn't like it because they were just that inarticulate about why they didn't like it.
Okay. I mean, I had one friend who didn't like it because it wasn't robust enough. He was expecting more, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. He was expecting that kind of thing.
I think maybe
Denzel played everything very intimately, very concentrated,
and that was the point in my. That's the other part. You have to almost detach yourself from what you've maybe been trained to ingest as the performance, and kind of go along with their ride of how do you see this? How is this? How are these words coming out of this character in your adaptation? When you're allowed, because that's always a point that I always try to help critics come out of, because some critics are so. They're critical because then they literally cannot think critically. In my opinion.
It reminds me of what I've seen on some political talk shows where I'll see somebody and it's like, you're just being paid to espouse this point of view. I'm not even sure you believe a word of what you're saying.
Right. You just keep whatever wheel you're on going. And that's it. Well, it wasn't like how they did it. Okay. And that still has nothing to do with the author and the tea of China. So can we understand that the interpretation is allowed, number one, and then number two, have we considered, let me just say this, I hope this relates. I study the Bible a lot, and I thought that there might be a generation who is literally going to say, how great thou art, for example. They'll hear this kind of language. And then there's an unlearned generation that'd be like, yeah, God does have some great art, doesn't he? And I'm thinking, I'd have thought of like, oh, wow. And you're really going to create theology based off of that interpretation of this sentence.
That's funny. That's genuinely funny, man. I could see a half-hour sitcom based on some
great art, man.
The kids are, God has great. How great thou art. How great is your art? Okay, great. I'm gonna.
and they'll just roll that. God wants me to have great art. God, I'm praying to you for great art. And to me, sometimes without being able to have been learned to then interpret what the original intent was. And then from its translations, because that's the other part. With the Bible, there's so many now translations because they've been able to pull off of and go through back to the Greek and go back with the contextual meanings of Greek and Hebrew that it was written in. That it's like, yes, the King James Version is a very solid Greek interpretation for that time.
Yeah.
But
and it uses the Textus Receptus. It doesn't use the modern critical edition.
Right.
Which is basically the Textus Receptus and some other stuff. Yeah.
But I said all of that because that is sometimes there's the narrow view that people will approach Shakespeare or approach acting is to say, I will take it exactly for what I can stomach out of what I know, not out of what is essentially the greater message of the opportunity to be interpreted.
One of the biggest misfires I ever saw in a Shakespearean performance from an otherwise fantastic actor was Jason Robards. And he played Brutus, I believe, in the same film where Charlton Heston played Antony. And the problem was Jason Robards, given everything else I've seen him in, very natural, very compelling. But when he's doing Brutus, he chose, or somebody told him, nobody else in the show does it. All these other people have plenty of Shakespearean experience. You can tell it's his first time dealing with the bard, or it's the first time he's dealt with it in a long time. And he does everything in a sing-song style. You know, and I can't remember any of Brutus's. The fault is not in our stars, but now I can't come up with it how he was doing it. But it's like, you know, when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. Oops,
got it.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself. I'm just going, I can't believe this. He couldn't escape the idea that it's poetry. Yeah, he was more worried about the meter than about a natural delivery, and it totally undercuts his performance.
This is why I appreciated Denzel's performance. On the contrary,
exactly,
because it felt more of an actual monologue of self, and you almost lose maybe that's why people are like, well, it needs to feel like poetry. No. It's almost you shouldn't necessarily have to bounce along for the Shakespearean iambic pentameter to work.
Well, it's like a recitative in opera. It should feel like a conversation.
Yes.
If it's well written, you shouldn't even be conscious that you're listening to music.
Exactly.
It should just feel like a natural conversation. Rossini's incredibly good at that.
Yes.
You know, but so are some of the other ones. But I'm a particularly big fan of Rossini. What I thought was amazing in watching Denzel play Macbeth was that I never really struggled to understand anything he was saying. I never really struggled to understand what emotion he was playing. And when he got to the Tomorrow and Tomorrow speech, because he's playing it for a camera and because he's playing it by himself, it was just totally like everything about me is falling apart and collapsing inward, and I have to stand here and take this. It reminds me of a statement Lyndon Johnson made about being president. He said there are times when it is like being a donkey tied to a tree in the middle of a hailstorm. And that's exactly how Denzel Washington played this. It's like everything I've planned is falling apart in front of my eyes, and I have to live with it. Totally opposite of the way Mark Pouhet played it. Mark Pouhet played it on stage.
Right.
And he did something I've never seen another actor do. He said, tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. And he stomped his foot. You know, it's like, and it was like
a tantrum almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. Orson Welles just played it the way I would expect a Shakespearean actor. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. And it was great. You know, it was great. But those two versions were so different from the standard thing.
And that is
just. And by the way, if you've never seen it, Marlon Brando's version of Mark Antony.
You're giving me a lot of homework, and I think that's what the beautiful part of it. And I might use that as an opportunity for us to pause for this Tuesday, because there's so much life to experience, friends, and I think the biggest takeaway I would have is that out of all we've said, find something to celebrate. Find something to watch without, with new context, because sometimes it's so good to see. Well, I like this version and compared to that version, versus this is the only version you've ever seen, and that's the only version you ever know. And that gives you.
I like things in the Dune version with Patrick Stewart.
I do.
There are certain things in it I like. I like things in the sci-fi version from the sci-fi TV
Television.
version, and I like things in the
from-
newer version.
Exactly.
If I was going to vote, I think the newest version is the better one, then I would put the sci-fi TV version second, and the David Lynch one third. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some things in each one that I think are spectacular.
And what makes, to me, life worth living is then you have all three to kind of enjoy at their own moments.
Yeah.
And that just gives us all, a bigger repertoire of excitement to live.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I've enjoyed it. Thank y'all. It's been another Tuesdays with Morris. I'm Justin Payne. Hope to see y'all again next week. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're listening to a frozen